Commission meeting, special meeting today. We're just going to jump right into it.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Tony Wheeler, the City Attorney, and I was asked to provide an overview of the process that the Commission followed in 2015, the last time we recruited a City Manager. So I have provided a staff report and links to a lot of the Commission agendas from that year. As you know, the City Manager, Thomas Marcus, announced that he will be retiring or resigning his position with the City effective in spring of 2019. So you will have a vacancy to fill. The filling of the vacancy is at the discretion of the Commission. You get to decide what process you use and how you go about selecting the person to fill that position. But I'll just summarize quickly what we did in 2015. Mr. Corliss, our previous city manager, announced that he would be taking a position with a town in Colorado, and his last day with the city was May 28th of 2015. Our commission had its first discussion of filling that vacancy on May 19th of 2015, and the commission convened and just had a public discussion and a good exchange of ideas. And at the conclusion of that meeting, the commission decided that it wanted to issue an RFP for executive search firm services. And so on May 26th then, following that meeting, staff prepared and issued an RFP to select a vendor or a firm that could help us do a nationwide search for the city manager position. A contract was executed on July 7th. Let me step back a little bit. At the May 19th meeting, the commission did decide to designate two commissioners to sort of serve in the lead role of evaluating proposals that we might get from the RFP and making a recommendation to the full commission on selecting a firm. And so Mike Amix and Commissioner Soden.
As the mayor, vice mayor.
You were vice mayor at the time.
Yeah.
I don't think Jeremy Farmer was the mayor at that time.
Yeah, it was mayor and vice mayor, me and Amix.
Okay. Well,
I could be wrong though, sorry.
I believe it was Jeremy was mayor and you were vice mayor
Well,
at
I
that
helped
point.
Amix.
Right. You were
So I
vice
just
mayor when you helped
assumed
him. Yeah,
it was-
but
I just assumed it was vice mayor.
yeah,
Yeah.
no. Well, anyway, that's beside the point. Mayor, vice mayor at the time then, Leslie Soden and Mike Amix, then interviewed the three firms that submitted proposals. Well, we had 9 firms that submitted proposals. We wintered it down to 3, and we conducted interviews. And a recommendation was then forwarded to the commission, and on July 7th, the full commission authorized the mayor at that time to execute a contract with Ralph Anderson and Associates to conduct a nationwide search. So that got underway. That contract cost the city $26,000 for that nationwide search. We also conducted a survey on Lawrence Listens to find out if members of the community had feelings or opinions on what qualities the city manager should possess. And that recruiter met with city commissioners, a number of city employees, and local stakeholders to try to develop the recruitment brochure and to make sure that the project manager, his name is Greg Nelson, understood what this community was looking for in its next leader. In early November, then the City Commission interviewed 7 candidates for the position in a closed session. And then on November 17th, 2015, the Commission announced the 3 finalists for the position. And those 3 finalists were invited to back to the City of Lawrence in December for some public interactions. They met with the city's executive team, they toured many city facilities, they met with various community stakeholders, and they participated in a reception at the library, the former library, the Carnegie Building. And then, of course, they had sit-down interviews with the commission in closed session. Finally then, in January of 14, the City Commission again convened a special meeting to announce the selection of Tom Marcus as its city manager, and the following Tuesday, his employment agreement was approved by the full commission at its regular meeting. So that is a summary for you of what we did in 2015. Again, it is your discretion on what process you use to select the next city manager, as long as, you know, you are not discriminatory and follow, you know, basic employment laws. So with that, I would stand for questions. I did provide a copy of the state statutes addressing the role or the duties of the city manager, and then earlier today, you were provided a copy of our code provisions on the city manager by Tom Marcus.
Thank you, Tony. Questions for Tony? Okay. Is there any other information from staff that anybody wants to? Okay,
No, we did provide on the agenda.
That's true.
That was used,
yeah, okay,
copy of the contract.
okay,
But no,
Right.
we don't have any other information.
okay. I guess we could take some public comment. Okay, back to the commission.
I feel like we had a good process last time. It was right after we were elected, though, and I guess Jeremy Farmer was briefly involved.
Yeah, well, one of the glitches that happened at that point was we ended up having to replace Jeremy before we went ahead and did the city manager selection. So that kind of put a little
Yeah.
That would be
lag in the
interest-
process.
Sorry, Stuart.
So I agree. I think it was a good process last time. I'm curious what kind of timeline we'd be looking at for something like this.
What was the overall timeline on that one again, just from very beginning?
Well,
to
we
the end?
started in May and ended
Yeah,
in
he-
December
He
or
resigned
January.
in May, and then it took 7 months start to
And
finish.
we didn't do
but-
anything until he actually left, I believe.
I guess
So-
the question is do we feel like we need new public opinion on what they're looking for city manager? Because that lengthens the timeline the most, I think, is when we're getting public input. Do we want to use the same public input process, or do we want to shorten it?
How long was it before? What was it, do you remember?
Well, if the
Was it
total
Lawrence
was
Listens, or?
6 months.
Well, we did the Lawrence Listens, we did the recruiter came in and got public input.
I think we usually have a month for Lawrence Listens. I don't know if Porter's in here.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you
Oh,
have a
there he
month
is.
for Lawrence Listens? Is that the standard? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back and look at that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one question. There's a month there.
I definitely, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way, but I definitely have interest in repeating the process we did once we have it narrowed to finalists. I thought that evening where we brought our 3 finalists into the Carnegie Building, I found that evening to be very productive personally. It gave a lot of community members the opportunity to actually have I don't know how long you spoke with members of the community. It's probably only a couple minutes each because there was 30 people in line, but it gave people the opportunity to, whatever their pressing issue is, get 2 or 3 minutes with them and have the same opportunity to ask all of the finalists the same question. And then as people left, I remember we had a ballot box, effectively, where individuals could kind of indicate their preference of the 3. And I thought that was an effective way to gather a small sample size of community feedback, particularly given that it came from a lot of individuals within the community that are typically very involved in the process, and here every Tuesday and things like that. So I would like to see us repeat that part of the process at least.
So I wasn't here at all during that process, and I might be the only one here who wasn't here at all during that process. So I think the questions that I would be asking is what went well, what could have gone better, and not only to the commissioners who were here, but also to Tom, to see if, you've worked in multiple communities and gone through this process several times. So what have you seen done well, and what could have gone better during that process for you as well?
You know, I thought your process was really, really well done, and obviously the results.
Where everybody's punchy tonight.
Is, I think that you should schedule a tour of the community. And maybe some interaction with some of the other leaders in the community. Maybe you, Haskell, you know, maybe have a panel of homeowners associations, presidents come in and give them a crack at the manager, candidates, because they play a pretty integral part in the community. But, you know, I would, I think some of those engagements could be, like they were set up at Carnegie, but maybe more on a, you know, sitting down leaders, or if you had presidents of HOAs, sitting around a table, just asking questions, getting a familiarity with the candidates, you might get a little different feedback. And, you know, some of the business community, you know, maybe divide up by category a little bit and let people have some of that interaction. Most manager candidates nowadays are pretty used to that, you know, kind of exposure and process that's pretty public. So any of that feedback is good for you. It's hard for, I think, for me to think that you're going to get significant input about what you're looking for from the community until they have a chance to see who the candidates are and maybe some of the questions that get answered. I think that probably has a higher value content, I would think, than, you know, beforehand. I think there's a reliance on the commission to kind of represent the community as to what that profile is. And I think, you know, your nature is to, you know, put that out there for the community. I'm just saying that I think the value later on in the process when you get to see those candidates is helpful. And maybe more so.
When we interviewed you and obviously hired you, one of the things that we did was we maintained applicant anonymity until it was down to 3. I mean, to the
Right.
point where when we had it narrowed to 7, we were effectively sneaking them in the back door on a Saturday type deal, because obviously, you know, if you're not going to get hired here, a lot of applicants may not wish to have their community know.
Right.
How do you feel about that as someone who's been to a lot of cities? At what level do we need to maintain that anonymity? I guess what I'm asking is, this go-round, if we're hoping to hold off on community engagement until we have our finalists, is it too early to announce finalists when we have it narrowed to, let's say, 6 or 7?
Well, you know, from a manager, you know, perspective, I would say that you have to understand that, and I don't feel this way about my relationship one bit, but you're going to have candidates that may have a more tenuous relationship with their elected officials. And so and you know, each of you, you know, when you kind of narrow to a group of 7, and I do this all the time when I'm selecting employees, mentally you kind of go through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rank of who they are. And so sometimes 6 is going to surprise you and maybe move up to that final group of 3 that you interview. But it seems to me that it's really more appropriate to expose the candidates when they're actually finalists.
Okay.
I wouldn't take the group, I liked the process that you used, because, you know, in this day and age, somebody will, you know, take offense that somebody's looking for another position at the time they're employed someplace else. And you know, if they don't get the position, you know, why would we want to jeopardize their current situation? And, which is really none of our business, right? So I kind of liked what you did last time. And you really, the other thing that you do by doing that is you'll find out a lot of times who's really serious, okay? Because if you had a group of 7 and one was saying, well, I'll take a flyer on this and see what happens, and then you offer to put them in the final group, and that means they're going public. You know, I've seen circumstances where all of a sudden one drops out, maybe 2 drop out. And so you want to be able to keep that pool at 7 and make sure that if offered the chance to go public for the final phase, that they're willing to do that. So I think it gives you a little bit more, and them more cover in that process. And if you're only going to seriously consider 3, why expose 7 or 8? That doesn't mean you couldn't final 4, you know, or some other number that you wanted to go through the interview process of.
Well, it sounds like if we move the Lawrence Listens part to after we have the finalists, public finalists, that might be a better way.
I'm not
I guess-
necessarily suggesting that, Leslie, I'm just
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that I think the value proposition, that the information feedback that you get from your citizens as it moves through the process, I think is a more serious indicator of what they pick up in the process. Early on, you know, I have to tell you, you know, when we did kind of the budget process, okay, where we put numbers and dots and things on things, it's like, once you finally get to your final budget document, that's where the rubber really meets the road, and you
Yeah.
really are talking about who you really think is the right person in this case, or what you really think the priority is in the community as to how the money should be spent. And that's all I'm saying about that.
I guess I'm reluctant to put the Lawrence Listens after we have finalists, because I think the Lawrence Listens part is, what are you interested in seeing in the next
Right.
manager, rather than who do you like?
Right.
And we could start that right now, frankly. I mean, there's nothing that, you know,
And to be clear, because I know that there was comments about the manager saying that he was, you know, resigning in spring. I did that entirely with the thought process that it gave you a flexibility for time, as you just noted how long, and you know, things happen that you're not going to anticipate.
Right.
And the other end of it is, once you made an offer, that doesn't mean the person's starting the next day.
that's another question, is how long?
That person is going to have, in my particular agreement, I have 60 days.
Yeah.
60 days, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
60 days.
you know, you kind of, you don't want to pull somebody out, you know, in that situation either. So I think you have to understand that there's all of that kind of time frame in there, and that's why, you know, that's why I set up not only beyond what the notice requirement in the agreement is, but then some flexibility if you know, if you run into some problems, or if this candidate needs some time to transition away from their current position if they're currently employed, that's in there.
And the other thing is, I mean, just quite frankly, we have a staff member who has experience being an interim city manager, so I'm not in a giant panic that, you know, if March 15th rolls around and Tom says, I'm out of here, and, you know, drives his U-Haul down 6th Street, that you know, the sky's not going to fall. We have somebody who has held that position before, did a great job when she held it in the interim before Tom got here, and I would have full faith that she could do that again if asked to do that.
And that's a good point. I agree with that wholeheartedly. On the other hand, this does come in the middle of budget season. I mean, if we go to an interim period, we'd be going into budget season, and the city manager's recommended budget's going to be due along there. So that budget stuff, help me out, Casey, it starts in February? So,
From the staff level, it starts a lot.
right,
earlier
yeah,
than
but I mean,
that.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, so, point noted, but there's also this other thing. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're hiring a new city manager, I'd like for them to be able to recommend the budget as opposed, that they're going to have for 2020, rather than an interim.
The only thing I would say to you is, that's a desire.
Sure.
Okay? The process and, you know, just the flow of the process is gonna have a lot to say about whether that person is selected in time. Some of those decisions in terms of the process have to be made in terms of what the manager's recommended budget is by then. I'm suggesting to you that potentially the current manager is the one that's gonna be making that recommendation on the budget.
I would think it would almost have to be, right? I
Well,
mean, it's almost October.
unless this thing really speeds up and you
Yeah.
really, you know, are ahead of the
Yeah.
curve on that.
Yeah.
I think you have to be ready for both propositions, and I would say to you that, number one, an incoming manager understands that, okay, any professional does. And the other part of it is you have an amendment process that if somebody comes in and really sees something that just doesn't set with the new manager, you have an amendment process that you can adjust your budget to deal with that.
Good point.
I think there's a better chance that the incoming manager is going to say, look, I just don't have enough, you know, understanding of the culture here, of the process here, for me to be able to say, this is what I would recommend at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would have more concern around someone swaggering in with an idea of what that budget should look
Right.
like without an experience in the community and a year of experiencing
Right.
a budget.
I am interested in trying to get the position filled, if possible. I appreciate what you're saying, and that's, you definitely don't want to rush it, but we've got 6 to 8 months, give and take, somewhere in that neighborhood. I would like to see it get filled if possible. I really would.
So I've got a list of things to talk about here. I think some of the decisions we have to consider, we don't have to make them now, but we can consider them as, do we want to have a search firm? If so, do we want to do an RFP?
I think using the previous person would be really helpful, and, I mean, it hasn't been that long ago that we've worked with them, and we have pretty much all of the same people sitting up here, and I think that would be really helpful to use the same one, and I was satisfied with their services.
Did we have a diverse applicant pool?
Well, I mean,
It was one
Yeah.
of the,
we had a diverse finalist pool, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought they did a good job, and I think we could get them again, or,
yeah, I
That
guess
would-
I don't know if we can.
yeah. What would that take to look into that?
You know, you folks, you give us a list of what you know, you're interested in doing, just give us direction and we'll follow up on it. Now, I want to point out a couple things. You're going to have some internal candidates. And so, at this stage, and I have to be, from an ethics code standpoint, I have to be very careful about not steering you. So, because it's clearly your decision, and I don't want to get in the way of that.
Okay.
So just make sure that when you ask us to do something, that it's a motion directing us to do it,
Okay.
and we'll make sure it gets done. And we'll make sure, likely through legal, and maybe some, you know, involvement with me, but you're gonna have some internals that have already kind of indicated their desire to apply, and they will step back and step away from the process so that there's no conflict there. We've already set up those firewalls to
Okay.
make sure that that's the case.
Well,
So-
I'm definitely interested in taking a look at the previous consultant that we used.
Well, there's two.
So can they make motions this evening to direct that? if that's what your preference is.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got two voices and nobody against at this point.
Yeah, you know, I thought they did a fine job. My only
Yeah.
concern with tonight picking the one would be just the rate, obviously. You know, I certainly
Yeah.
would like this to be
Yeah.
a competitive rate.
Yeah,
No, I'm not saying pick them tonight, but at least let staff
Right.
begin the process of reaching out to them. That's kind of where.
Have
Yeah.
staff reach out to the 3 finalists for the search firm,
Yeah.
instead of just reaching out to only one,
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
and see if they're interested again.
I mean, how is that different than a request for proposals?
Well, that goes out to anyone, right?
Well,
It's timing, I think, some of it.
yeah, there is the timing element involved in that. I mean, knowing our public, it would be just as easy to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
Just do the
just
RFP
do the
process.
RFP.
That would be my suggestion. And then
Yeah.
if our previous
Right,
firm
yeah.
responds that
I
they're
mean-
interested,
I
obviously,
mean, yeah, I mean, we were very happy with them. We'd
Right.
hoped that they would apply.
Right.
And, you know, but,
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
can
I think
see what's
that
available.
doing a request for proposals is a good way to go about this.
So do we need to have a timeline tonight then, to put out an RFP then?
No.
No.
Okay.
I don't
No,
think so.
the request for the proposals on the executive search firm, they will come back pretty much and tell you, you know, they'll give you some kind of ideas about what that process would take.
Yeah, that was one of the things that they did that helped us. I'm trying to remember too, did they do a primer on employment law for us, or Tony, did you do that?
Probably Tony.
Yes, there, if you'll remember, you may not remember, but.
I'm sorry.
before the interviews were conducted, there was a brief on the law and what was appropriate and not appropriate. So yes, that's part of the package, or it was for that firm.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very important aspect of this, and, you know, that's something that we need to be very cognizant of as we go into this process. So, as I say, I'd favor doing an RFP and hoping that the folks that applied last time would do it again.
Sounds good, yeah.
agree.
And if you want, we can convey to them that we do encourage them to
That would
resubmit.
be fine,
We
yeah.
can do
That'd
that.
be fine. So I think if we had a motion on that, that would be a good first step.
I would make a motion that we direct staff to prepare an RFP seeking a firm to do a nationwide search, and that as part of the RFP, they get in touch with Ralph Anderson and convey a desire to have them as one of the applicants.
Second.
Does that meet all our requirements? Okay. We have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda. All in favor?
Aye.
I think that gets us started. Is there anything else that we want to?
Do we want to have 2 commissioners review all of the applicants?
Well, that actually is the second thing I had after RFP. I got derailed because I wasn't sure we were going to do it. So I'm open to suggestion.
I think it was good last time that we had the mayor, vice mayor, because we were very fresh off of an election. And so I felt like that represented the community pretty well. And so I don't have any issue with the mayor, vice mayor, but also keeping in mind that you're a little less fresh and she is more fresh.
Yeah,
So,
I'd be happy to defer to the folks who are more recently elected if that,
whichever.
I mean, that's a good
but
point,
Mayor,
Leslie.
vice mayor is appropriate too, I think,
And,
so. It's up to you
so,
guys. Not me, is what I'm saying.
yeah,
I would be happy to serve in any capacity that would be helpful.
yeah. Okay. Well, I think we can just assign that to Commissioner Ananda and Vice Mayor Larson. Okay. I don't think we need a motion on that. I think we can just.
Do we need a motion?
Just so I'm clear, so they will review the proposals that come in and make a recommendation for the full commission to consider in a public meeting.
That's correct.
Yeah.
On the RFP for the
On the
executive
RFP
search
for the executive search.
initially.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Okay.
good.
Do we want to wait till after the Lawrence Listen survey to determine what kind of city manager we're looking for? Are we still looking for a transformative type of city manager, or?
I think the search firm will be talking to us about that. And I think having the Lawrence Listens, having them guide us on the Lawrence Listens would probably be useful.
One of the things I really appreciated about Ralph Anderson, that firm, was that they had taken each of us out individually and had one-on-one conversations with us about what we were seeking in a city manager. I think sometimes those conversations end up a little more accurate than when we try to come to one conclusion as a body of five. I found it personally to be very helpful to have that one-on-one engagement, so I would hope that that would be something that would happen again.
If I might interject.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the normal things for an executive search firm to do is develop what's referred to as a profile
Right.
of the candidate pool that you're looking for, what kind of qualities and all of that. And if you look at the information that was shared with you tonight,
Exactly.
it's all embedded in there.
Right.
And it really creates kind of a roadmap for your new manager to follow in those first months, first year to get going. And, you know, I pulled that up on a regular basis to determine, you know, if I was on track with what the commission had said they wanted as a part of that application.
So I think having the search firm essentially work with us on the Lawrence Listens and putting together that stuff is, you know, what we're paying them for. So,
Yes.
Yeah, I think that I have some questions around the Lawrence Listens, you know, the extent to which that information is going to form what we're looking for, and then, you know, as elected folks in the community, being trusted to create that by virtue of being elected to this position to represent our
Yeah.
community. I want to be clear, because if we get, you know, responses on a survey that aren't reflective of what we as a commission are looking for, the extent to which we would bring that in as well.
Well, I think Lawrence Listens is one data set. We also talk to people every day, and we hear from them. And so that's another data set. It may not be as formalized in certain ways, but
Yeah, I'm already hearing from folks.
that's why we're having this meeting right now. So
Can we go ahead and kick off the Lawrence Listens
I
questions? then?
I think we ought to wait until we have the search firm so that
And
they
then
can
do
help
Lawrence
us.
Listens.
Yeah, they can help us with setting that whole thing up. So, you know, we've made a couple of decisions tonight. I'm not sure there's anything more for us that we have to do, and,
Well, I've asked the questions that I was thinking of, so
Okay,
I'm all right
great.
now.
Do we have any sort of time frame as to when to put the RFP out, or is that too early still to?
I think it might be still a bit early.
Okay.
Again, once you selected your executive search firm, that's going to be your go-to person to help coordinate those things. Tony will certainly serve as your legal advisor, but at some point, as you recall with Mr. Nelson, you had that kind of rapport with him, and he kind of gave you those time schedules.
But the time frame for putting the RFP for the firm out?
You want to know that?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. Is
You
there?
know, I would think we could get that out in the next couple of weeks,
Okay,
yeah.
if that's what your desire is.
yeah,
And we have one from the last time that,
right.
and in fact, with the commission's acquiescence, you know, because this is really supposed to be a commission-driven program, would it be all right, we shared it, have communication back and forth with Lisa and Jennifer, so that, I mean, they're the ones that are going to be
Right,
reviewing
yeah.
so they should be comfortable with it.
That'd work.
If y'all are comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
fine with that. I guess there's one other aspect to this. It's been a while since I've, you know, considered the employment law aspects of this stuff. I think I would benefit from a conversation with Tony. So I think I'll be seeking Tony out to just walk me through the do's and don'ts. And I guess I'd recommend that to my fellow commissioners, just so that you have a chance to make sure that right from the very beginning, you're aware of our legal responsibilities in this matter.
Well, I'm just saying we could do that in mass, or we can do that individually.
Yeah, I think I'd just be comfortable doing it individually. And
Do you,
if you all want to
I mean,
just
it
do
might
it
be more
together.
efficient for Tony's time if we did it
Yeah.
once instead of
or
her
we
having
can
to
tape the one that we do with Stuart.
There you go.
film it, get Kirk to film it or something.
Pardon?
Get Kirk to film
Yeah,
it.
that's it.
Yeah.
Well, I can think about the best way to do that
That'd be good.
in a timely manner and
Yeah.
and maybe bounce some ideas off of you.
Okay, great. Okay. Anything else for the,
Move that we adjourn.
Second.
we have a motion from Commissioner Herbert, second from Commissioner Ananda, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you all.
Just not me. Just not me.
Been there, done that.